Hey yo, what it do? What it do? It's your boy Q, and welcome to the most electrifying podcast in esports entertainment. Brought to you by the coldest tournament host with some hot takes from your favorite casters. This is the Meltdown. Along with me for the ride, it's my partner in crime, my brother from another mama. It's the Llama. How you doing today, fam?
Fantastic. I'm excited. We get to talk about some esports. We get to, break some things down. My day's going, my morning, my afternoon, wherever we could be recording this because you guys don't know at home. But my day's going fantastic. How about you, Q?
Oh, living the dream, man. It's another beautiful day in the neighborhood. We had some snow yesterday, but already getting it off the roads. Everything's kind of back to normal. So I'm excited to kind of get down into it. We've got a lot of things going on: RLCS, ALGS, even VCT kicking off this weekend. I don't think we're talking about that too much today, but I think the best place probably to start off, since you and I kind of cast the most of it, feels like together, would probably be Rocket League, right?
Definitely does. I think we start off with the open qualifiers. We have open qualifiers for all of our regions. North America specifically is really what I want to talk about because, again, we're North American. We got to talk about the results. And so the Swiss stage bracket isn't built just yet. That is still to come this next weekend. But we do have those 16 teams that are going to be playing for those top 8 seeds. And I got to say, Q, this Pirates on a Boat squad really has stepped up in the past. I think they're a bubble team that has transitioned to something of a semi-pro to near pro team, going 6-0, by the way, in their bracket in the third day. So I feel like they are the main target of my kind of sightline, but all the other pro teams seem to do pretty well too.
Yeah, I feel like we're definitely seeing a lot of the consistency at the top from a lot of the organizations that we are used to seeing, right? When you talk about, I mean, when you talk about teams that at least in NA, right, the G2s, the Gen
Yeah.
Gs, the Space Station Gamings, but then I think when you kind of start getting towards, I feel like the end of that top eight is about that 7-8 position is kind of where things really get busted wide open. I mean, we've even seen in the sense where we've got teams that are in this stage of Swiss that didn't make last stage of Swiss, who I even think could make some big noise this time around in Swiss. So I feel like in NA, that kind of middle tier that's right behind that top, well, maybe not right behind the top tier, but that's behind that topmost tier. It feels like it's wide open right now.
It really does. And I think specifically you kind of look at that losers round 3 in the lower bracket, and it's kind of littered with a ton of teams that really could make a difference. And
Mhm.
Lotus 8, they were playing with Lev, Nightya, and Zapdos. They no longer have Lev. They both went looking for team. They kind of split up 2-1. So it'd be interesting to see. We know Zapdos and Lev both really good shooters. They got round 3 with kind of playing 2 players of the exact same play style. You have teams like Combos Are Flying with the player Comp who has so much CRL experience. You have so many teams that I feel like Omelet, who even had a upset early, that I feel like could make such a difference later on.
Yeah, I feel like Amla could make a difference later on. Even I think for me, I actually did my pick'ems here. Actually, earlier today, I recorded it, but for deleted XD, I
Yeah,
feel like it's another even team that I look at for them, and I'm like, man, they could like really make some noise, especially
yeah,
kind of depending on how the bracket itself plays out. A team that only made their first Swiss bracket last time around, now looking to get out of Swiss for the first time. Um, but even when you talk about some of the teams that didn't make it, I mean, the Muffin
hmm
Men not making it, right? You also have young whippersnappers who made Swiss last time around, not making it. Plot twist.
yeah,
There's a good amount of teams that are riddled in there. I feel like it lets you know, especially a lot of the teams that we see, whether it's through Frost and some of the other like
yeah.
weekly scenes, like you got to make sure you're showing up and showing out and putting your best foot forward because teams are showing out when it comes to when it matters the most, and that's on RLCS qualifiers.
That absolutely is, and I think it's important. You mentioned Frost this last week. We got to saw Emilio the Gamer kind of play on a different team than usual, not playing on that Akron Zips Gold squad. But I mean, the other Akron Zip squad actually making it to that Swiss stage, the first CRL squad, I believe, to ever make as a full team towards that Swiss stage. I think that is just absolutely such an accomplishment. But I also think it's good to look a little bit further back as well. I think I'm looking at orgs specifically like Cloverity, where they made a couple roster changes on their starting lineup, but their academy roster, which has an average age of 14, got the same exact rank as them and almost won more games and almost went further.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like, I mean, one, we're starting to see part. I think part of the reason they changed the age gap. I think there's definitely conversations around, should it be as low as it was? But
Yes.
there's talent out there. You and I even know that from, high school leagues that we both cast in, right? Like we know that there are people who are young that are like very, very good at this game. But
Yeah.
I feel like when you look at, first off, I kind of want to talk about, you mentioned the Akron Zip team for our CRL team as a whole to make it to RLCS is really cool. I think that pathway to pro being a thing, super cool.
It is.
But I also don't wanna make it seem like they're the first, like, CRL players that have
Yeah,
kinda
yeah.
gotten there because obviously we've seen it before, and even, like, we've seen this year, when you look at a team like Deleted XD, you look at a team like Incorrect that is made of a roster completely full of CRL players. I think we are starting to see this tide where I felt like before in the past, it was when pros finally got a little too old, they then maybe went to the
Yeah.
CRL route, right? You know what I mean? Now we're almost seeing it where people who are kind of learning, they're getting their grounds up under them. Now that pathway to go the opposite way is becoming viable as well.
It really is, and I think specifically, it's kind of interesting. I did an event a couple of weekends ago that it was a high school or excuse me, a college LAN with 7 of those college teams. I got to interview some of the players and whatnot. One of the players was talking about how like it's a weird thing that like collegiate players kind of go and play RLCS on their own, but he does kind of understand it because again, you don't always have the best 3 players on your own team. Sometimes you need to go find one. But he was this crazy, insane striker, and I'm like, "What are your plans for LCS?" And he's like, "My plans are to leave my 2 teammates behind and go join some other team." So I don't know if that's going to be a trend in the future, or if we're going to see more like teams like Akron Zips that just get in as a full squad and join up.
So and I guess maybe not to jump ahead of the topic too much, but I think it really kind of goes to I think a trend we're seeing in North America where the veterans aren't necessarily picking up, like, the young talent unless they, like, have an active
Sure.
vouch, you know what I mean? So it's within their own network. And while it you can find people in your, like, network that way that can play the game that well, I feel like it really restricts things, and it has all of this talent that could kinda use that mentoring, being under the wing of a veteran that's,
Mhm.
been around for a few seasons that could really allow these new players to reach new plateaus. They're not quite getting that. Um, I I go back and forth on it, right? As much as I would love to see more CRL teams going in here, I kind of as a team that one, and they get the camp to already boot camp, they're already at school together, right? But you get so many advantages of having that experience. But I
Sure.
do feel like when you talk about putting your best team together, there needs to be more mixing of the good talent coming in, whether that's
Yeah.
CRL or even younger players, with some of these players that have been around for a while. When we see these even like not ragtag teams, but these kind of like late
Yeah.
assembled teams of pros that were like, oh, well, we don't have a roster to go to. Let's get together. None of them picked up. The only one you can think of is Pirates on a Boat, who you were talking about. They
Mhm.
picked up five up and like kind of had a pretty big like instant chemistry. You know what I mean?
I mean, the 5-up pickup was probably I think it is one of the biggest pickups of a bubble player in this kind of season of Rocket League. I mean,
Mhm.
5-up was a player that we both know played in so many weekly events, played with the other squad, and then like showed himself as just a great player, so they picked him up. So I do think that they need to kind of delve more into the bubble scene, and I think as well there are talent rising that we talk about. I think I was hearing it correctly that the Cloverity Academy squad was super hyped because they were all B rank and 6 mans, and I think they said if you make it to losers round 3, you get promoted to B plus. So I think a lot of those teams are starting to move up not only in the world of Rocket League, kind of get their social media following, but also in the 6 man server, which it is important to sometimes get that vouch. If you're not B plus, if you're not A, sometimes you won't even land on team.
Yeah, I mean, or not even just get the opportunities to show that you deserve a spot to
Yeah.
be on a team, right? So it's definitely I don't know what has to change for that to change because I do feel like when you look at across the ocean, we've seen a lot of other regions that you put a
Yeah.
young talent with Zen with some experience that things kind of pop off. You have the twins over in Mina, you put them underneath some experience and they start to grow even more. So I feel like it's something that's maybe missing in NA, but we're starting to see it. I think Pirates on a Boat sees it.
Mhm.
I do want it was something I even wondered when we saw the whole Hey Bro team ended up getting
Yeah.
signed by TSM, which is a big org jumping in, right? But it's like you're jumping in with basically all, not all RLCS rookies, but
Yeah.
very minimal experience. Instead of where any three of those or any of those players, I'm especially looking at Wavy though, could have made some other rosters a lot better in the offseason. It's but instead of just kind of stuck playing with, well, I don't want to say stuck playing with TSM, but playing with the team that has less
Yeah.
experience. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you do have two CRL players there, and you do have Wavy, who I think we both know is going to be a superstar as soon as we saw him, was just winning literally every single tournament, every single
Right.
ones tournament. So I think Wavy is young as well. I think he's 16 or 17, so he
16.
has that room to improve, and he has those two CRL members behind him. They might not have as much experience in RLCS, but I feel like, like you said, it's just a choice that I think you have to make if you're TSM. You see that they are one of the best squads. I think they were possibly the best pickup of any available organization, and you get it done. You now have a great team that has made it to the Swiss stage in day 3. So I think towards your earlier point, though, it's very interesting, kind of comparing overseas to here, comparing the other regions to here, because that kind of gets us towards our next topic of like, is North America like falling behind?
Well, I feel like going into even from the off season from last season into this year, we kind of saw a lot of the shakeup, a lot of the roster mania
Yeah,
kind of unfolding. And I think for a lot of people, they saw that it was overdue. We saw kind of
yeah,
I think across the board in esports, but especially in Rocket League, that COVID bubble, everyone had money. So then it kind
it's
of
true.
became a bidding war for the top players, right? And then all of a sudden, you have nowhere to unload these really big contracts. You're almost stuck, like, feeling like you have to try to make it work. Um, I do wonder if even still there's kinda some of that layover of, um, "Oh, we're not making the money we used
Right.
to, so maybe I'm not putting forward the work." I'm not sure if that's the case. I also tend to think, and it's not just in Rocket League, but I actually think it's across esports in general. I think the American ego really plays against
Yeah.
competitors. When you look at just the French region in Rocket League, right? Like, well, I mean, is it the French region EU? Lol, lol, lol. But like even just specifically like the French region itself, right? Like you have these teams that instead of them feeling like they had to be, like, at each other's neck coming for one another's spot. They're rank grinding together when they're on opposite teams, they're learning from
Right.
one another versus trying to constantly, like, cut at one another, and I wonder if as
Mm.
much as, iron sharpens iron, and I get that whole perspective, right? I think there has to be a point where we can set those things aside for the betterment of even just the region as a whole, and I'm not sure NA is there.
I don't think so either. I mean, I've seen it multiple times. I'm watching these RLCS team streams or watching the player point of view, and they're like, "Okay, we got to go find a scrim to play somebody an hour before." They message somebody, and then they drop out because the other team doesn't think they're good enough, even though they've made it to the exact same round. They're in the exact same position. You might have different players, but it definitely feels like there's an ego issue there. That if they just you just start playing everybody. You just start playing the teams that are, maybe a little tiny bit worse than you. It can really help you both. And I can understand the point of view of pro teams of like, you don't want to give over all of your strategies. You don't want to give over your playbook. You don't want to have as much VOD footage out as possible. But I think that's just like a loser mentality. That's just like saying,
Yeah.
okay, we're too good to reveal any of our secrets. And if we reveal our secrets, we're going to lose the game. And that is just discrediting the coach, the players, and everybody, I feel like, on the entire team.
Yeah, I almost look at it as I don't want people to find their flaws through
Right.
VODs instead of saying,
Yeah.
"You know what? I don't care. Our
Yeah.
game is that strong. You can watch it all you want. We're just going to be better at Rocket League than you."
Yeah.
Um, which it's almost like the opposite of what we were just talking about with the whole, like, competitive attitude, which it's like such a weird, I don't know, like catch-22 in the region. It's very
It is.
I feel like when you look at the talent, I don't think that at a person for person individual, like, mechanical skill,
Yeah.
I don't think that you can say that NA is outpowered by, the EU region, but when you look at it on paper, you just can't even stand a chance in the fight. Like you don't even
Yeah.
have a dog in the fight, Holmes. You know what I mean?
It seems that way. I mean, I think as well that like it's kind of that same issue between North America and EU, where EU is kind of like, okay, we are the best region in the world. Why would we play another pro team? Why would we, join some of these other tournaments and play against them if we're once again going to reveal things that could possibly put them further ahead? I think they kind of, like you said, play within themselves a little bit better, but I think there's definitely some younger talent that could start to shake things up. And you're talking about players that they might not be ready now. There might be, again, I look back to the Claverity Academy roster that is, again, average age of 14. You got Scythe on there who is always hyping them up, but they are young and they have time to improve before they kind of hit the big stage, and they're already earning money. So it's kind of insane to see.
I think the other thing too is when you look at I feel like it's like a multi-layer like issue, right? Because when you look at the way organizations are built, or maybe not so much organizations are built, but the expectation from an NA run organization versus a
Yeah.
European run organization. Um, when look at things like boot camping, right? Like over in EU, it's very much kind of
Yeah.
expected that you're going to boot camp within season, or at least for heading into an event, right? Whereas doesn't seem to be the case so much, especially particularly in regional play, in North America. And while I can understand that, a lot of landmass for North America as
We're
a,
big.
a military pause, as a military brat who, has done quite a bit of traveling. I understand that from the East Coast to the West Coast of North America is a lot wider than the East Coast, the West
Yeah.
Coast of, pretty well any other country. You know what I mean? So, other outside than like Russia, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So, um, I I get that there's a distance problem there, but I also know that North America in general is paying their players more too. So,
Yep.
at what point do either you cut back on the pay to the players a little bit more and then say, "Hey, but we are going to pay for the boot camping,
Yeah.
for these 2 months for this split and these 2 months for this split. We're in a boot camp." Even if it's for like 2 of the 3 events, right?
Yeah.
Because the way that the schedule is set up right now, that would just mean that you're boot camping for a month, and that's
Right.
financially pretty easy to do. I feel like you
Yeah.
do it for, qualifier 2 and 3, and then if you make land, you boot camp again, a week before you set up and, move. Which I guess while we're talking about it, did you see that there's locations been announced for RLCS?
I did not.
Going to Copenhagen, baby,
Oh,
for, land number 1. So, um, if you know that you're gonna be going there, then you boot camp once again, but
it's true.
we don't see it in North America, and I don't know if it's a
Yeah.
cultural difference because, again, it's like "Oh, we're the best at what we do, so we can do it from the comfort of our own home," or, what it is. I actually kinda felt bad when I saw all the discourse kind of around the topic on Twitter. I kind of felt bad that I never noticed during broadcast because they usually show,
Yeah.
like, the cams of the players,
Hmm.
and yeah, when you're watching EU, it's usually a team that's all in the same room.
Yep.
You can see one player over the shoulder, and it's usually not the case in North America. And can't help but wonder if that's reflections in the results of it.
I mean, I think it's interesting. I definitely think you can kind of take into account that the landmass issue that, like, yeah, you could have three players, like one's in California, one's in Maine, one's in Florida. Where are they gonna boot camp, like in the
Right.
middle of that? But at the same time, I think it is a little bit of that overinflation, and I think we're seeing it with a lot of esports that you paid a ton during COVID. You have these kind of contracts that are still sitting there, and then now you have to break them off. But those players, now that they've earned that much, they feel like they deserve that much as well. So they're not going out to get a different contract. They're maybe not working as hard, like you mentioned, to try and go do that. And I don't even know if it is the org's fault because I don't know how much behind the scenes like if the orgs have been offering for boot camps and the players are just like, no, we're not going to do that. We have school, we have other things, we have CRL, we're earning more money here. Why would we go boot camp? Or if it is actually like the org saying, okay, well, we don't have the money, which is possible as well. I just think it's absolutely massive when you get 3 of the players in person. There's so many communication benefits. There's so many just like bonding benefits that like these teams that are breaking up after maybe one qualifier together, you feel like could just find that cohesion if they boot camp for maybe a month.
Yeah, and I also feel like I mean, I think anyone who has done a boot camp for like an event, everyone talks about the benefits of it, right? I think the benefits are
Yeah,
undeniable. It from what I saw through the couple of different Twitter posts, because there were quite a few of
there
them.
were quite a few.
Uh, but and it was an interesting topic for me, honestly. So I read through quite a bit of it. Um, Again, it kind of comes back to more of a cultural thing. It just seems
It
like
does.
it's not a emphasized point in North America, and because it's not an emphasized point in North America, North American problems don't see or North American players don't see a problem
Yeah.
with not boot camping. And the few people that seem to have a problem with it, I see excuses get brought up, but that's really all they are is excuses. Because but, like, dog, you're signed to an org where I'm pretty sure you're getting paid, 5 figures a month or close to it,
Right.
and you're telling me you can't, for a month, go stay at a hotel and book at, like, a land facility in a big city where you're gonna have good ping and, like, boot camp? Like, I'm not
Yeah.
like, come on, dog, you know what I mean? Like, I don't care if it's you want the org to be the one responsible paying for it or you as a competitor, eh, how much do you want it, you know?
I I just think it's so tough. I mean, especially with reducing the age for RLCS, like you're talking about kids that are like still in middle school, still in high school, that are having to complete their classes. And sometimes, like if you take the example of TSM, they're partnered with 2 CRL players and a high school
Mhm.
player. One of them, which is having to, do high school classes, the other two, which are having college classes. So that kind of affects it as well. That like it's not it is an excuse, but like at the same time it can be sometimes just really tough with younger players to like one get them out of the house and away for a month away from school, and two like with all those kind of merging schedules.
Yeah, that's fair. I do think there are some, like, genuine
Yeah.
I say excuses, but they're not excuses, but, like, genuine reasons
Yeah.
why it could not be happening, especially with a younger player base. I do think that there are several teams, though, that are genuinely making excuses as to why they aren't
I think so.
camping, though. So, um, I mean, and it really shows in the results, man. I think the product overall, when you looked at even top 4 compared to EU and NA, in EU and NA, like, Final 4 day was I mean, not even Final 4 day, the last 2 days, it
Yeah.
was the Gen G and G2 show until it was Gen G versus G2, and then it was
Yeah.
literally just the G2 show. Um, but and that makes you almost have that concern is G2 if G2 is that much better than the second place team, who's that much better than the rest of the pack, what does 3rd through 8th do to close that gap? And I don't
Yeah.
it's so weird, right? Because I'm usually on the side of, well, let it cook a little bit. I don't like
Right.
seeing
Right.
rosters get together, have one bad event, and then go, "Oh,
Yeah.
let's blow this thing up." Because I do think that you have to let things simmer a little bit. But I think historically in North America, um, we tend to leave things on the stove too long as well. So it's about finding that balance.
Definitely is. I really think for some of these teams it's just about grinding even more. I think that, you know, the players again they get complacent. They say, "Okay, I've made it to B plus. I'm good. We we made top 32. I made enough money. I'm gonna go chill for a little bit." But I really think you have to keep playing, keep grinding, and keep working your hardest. And it is kind of weird to have that one team that is a lot better than the others. Like I'll always look at the LCS, which I know you don't follow, but the North American League of Legends League, where all 8 teams, it feels like right now, are have the ability to win the championship. Where in previous seasons it hasn't felt like that. Where there is this one team that kind of is over everybody, but it feels weird when there is that one team. It feels less competitive. It feels less that like. It also feels like G2 will eventually run into a wall where they are playing maybe not worse teams than them, but teams that it doesn't feel like it's close. They're not gaining any skills or gaining any extra knowledge from that, and then they start to fall off as well.
Yeah, it should be it's definitely I feel like as the season go on, it is a concern. It's almost like kinda Gen G had that to start off, like, their run, right? Like, they kind
Yeah,
of had a big explode like, they were just winning everything, and almost kinda felt like I don't know if it was a sophomore slump or, um
yeah.
I mean, maybe this was part of the reason why G2 kinda wanted to conserve some of their honeymoon phase, right? Part of the reason they didn't do so much of
Yeah.
the off-season stuff. They do look good for now.
They do.
I gotta say, I think that they are definitely my favorite heading into this event.
Yeah.
I feel like first off, what do we even call these? Are we like? I was trying to call them qualifiers, but then I just heard the desks in both NA and EU just consistently call them the regionals, even though they're
Mm.
put as qualifiers
Yeah.
on Wikipedia. Because last year, we had the fall, winter, and spring, but they were the regionals. So you had like the
Yeah.
open qualifier, closed qualifier, and the invitational. Are we just calling these regional events? I don't know. Anyways, that's a rant. Doesn't matter. Um, I do think as far as we look at in North America, because of the fact that there's two of the like that stuck at the top, that we're going to be kind of separated from the rest in both G2
Yeah.
and Gen G. That 3rd and 4th place spot means you've gotta bring it every qualifier, because if you
Yeah.
happen to not because of the point fall off, you're
Yeah.
kind of SOL, really, in the
You really are. Yeah.
RLCS points, like, for, like, your seating, you know?
Yeah, I mean, it's very, very important, and I honestly think some teams it always happens with Swiss. As much as I love Swiss and I think it's an amazing format, there are always like one or two teams that get screwed either by in a good way or a bad way. That you get three really easy teams or you get three really hard teams. So you really do have to bring it every single time, and I'm looking to see which is going to be one of those teams to step up. I think TSM, although an amazing team, if Wavy's not having a good day, they just don't seem to play well. So I think it comes down to that about that consistency where you look at teams like Energy who maybe lost up in that uppers who were a favorite. You look at teams like Pirates on a Boat who have now made 2 times Swiss in a row. I think it's about, again, bringing your A game every single time because you could be going up against one of these TSMs or one of these NRGs that maybe have a little bit shakier of an opportunity, and if you take them down, that improves your chances so much.
So, of when we look at NA,
Yeah,
again, we know G2, we know Gen G, we know they're probably gonna be consistent even heading into Sunday.
yeah,
If you had to look at the rest of the field going into Swiss, who's, like, the one give me, like, 1 or 2 teams that you're, like, really looking forward, whether it's just through Swiss or even
yeah.
seeing them get to top 4 potentially.
Man, I will say I really love the Pirates on the Boat roster. I
They
think
look
that
good.
they look insane. They went 6-0. They were kind of the favorite to win their section of the bracket. But at the same time, I mean, the pickup of 5 up was just so crazy to me. And I think they play so well with him. They play so good as a squad. Another squad I'm looking at, I mean, is G Buffo, who took down Shopify Rebellion. I think Buffy and G-Man, both players that we've seen in the bubble along with Hazo that have
Yep.
kind of started to grow in popularity, started to play in these events, and we're seeing it. I think this is one of the teams specifically that we saw that might have split up and split on different teams to play with different people, but kind of got back together for RLCS. But they were grinding in the offseason. They were playing in as many tournaments as they can to get better. So I think those two, although they made it through the winners bracket, will probably have a possible little bit easier route, have a chance to do it. I also think the Elite XD squad, I think you mentioned them. They just look really, really good. Their roster able to take down Pipsqueaks to move onto the stage. I think they are very consistent is the one thing that's good about them.
I was looking at the G Buffo roster because I was trying to figure out, like, why they sounded familiar, right? And then
Yeah.
I saw their roster, and then I was doing my pickups earlier today,
Yeah.
and I really wanted to pull for G Buffo. I unfortunately couldn't
Mhm.
have them going through on
Oh,
Swiss. Um, but I think part of that one is because I do feel like even if there's a fall off after the top 2, I feel like 3 through
yeah.
6 is I feel like locked in the sense that they're the top 6, you can kind of shuffle them in any order. I'm looking at I'm looking at teams like Luminosity, Space Station
Yeah.
Game, right?
Yeah.
Like where you put them, the Dignitases, right? Like where you put them is kind of really based off how you feel, but they're
Yeah.
probably in your top 6 somewhere, right? But when you look at those last 2 spots, there's so
Mhm.
much. I mean, OG didn't look great last Swiss, but I feel like when you
Yeah.
look at their roster of JNabs, Nolly, Calm, like, how could you not be motivated to think that they could at least put it together through a Swiss stage with their experience and have, like, a good 3-1, 3 maybe even 3-2
Yeah.
run? I don't know if they're a team that can, like, clean sweep their way,
No.
especially knowing
No.
that they're in the bottom half of Swiss, they're gonna have a tough matchup early on, but,
That's true.
um, I feel like this qualifier, though, I think at least one of the CRL teams, and I know there's
Okay.
technically only, like, the one that's being, like,
Yeah.
publicized because Akron's, like, the
Yeah.
full roster, but I think when you look at University of Akron, Deleted XD, and Incorrect, don't
Yeah.
be surprised if 2 of those team end up busting up some brackets. I still think only of the 3 probably, and I'm would put my money on, well, I wouldn't put my money on it, but if I had to say, like, of the 3 of them who I would think is going to, like, make some noise and actually make top 8, I think it's Deleted XD.
Yeah.
I will say, and, not to, try and give too much away from my video, I do have all 3 of them that I just mentioned, I think, going to round 5. Like, I
Okay.
think all 3 of them make some noise, um, which might actually cause some mid-split shakeups because all these veteran teams are seeing the young talent doing so well.
And I think the veteran teams have to be really, really careful. I think this qualifier specifically and the next one is going to be where we're going to see the young talent just go for the throats. I think we saw it with Omelet, who is kind of more of a bubble team, but they're maybe a little bit more experienced with Lion Blaze and the crew there. They lost to the Cloverity Academy roster, who really brought it to them. This young roster, I keep bringing it back to them. That these young players, they are going to put absolutely everything on the field. They are going to try every new strategy. They're going to make sure that if you have a weakness, they're going to find a way to exploit it. So although these teams that are under organizations, they have been proven and they have been tested, I think they better be careful because these young rosters are going to be out to play.
All I know is I'm gonna be excited for, Championship Sunday. I
Ooh,
love the way that things kind of lay out now where if you do wake up to, kinda watch, like, the OCE APAC stuff, there's, like, I think, like, a 2-hour break between OCE and then when MENA starts, but you basically get a whole day of Championship Sundays
yeah,
if you're keeping up, especially because I think this week across the globe, I think on all the minor regions, main broadcasts are back, which is super exciting, so
that's awesome. We love to see that for sure. All right, I think that is all I have to talk about Rocket League. Other than one other thing, Q. We were talking about Twitter discussions. We were talking about heated debates, and there was one that popped up on my timeline a little bit recently that all of the Fortnite pros versus all of the Rocket League pros were debating which game is harder to master.
CS.
CS. That's not an option. Fortnite or Rocket League.
Um, I mean, I think with how hectic things get in, especially build side,
Hmm.
I feel like the mechanics on Fortnite, I would have to. I know it's gonna break Rocket League players'
Yeah.
hearts. I'd have to put it higher. Um, I do think, however, that Rocket League is an ever expanding game, whereas it
Okay.
does seem like on the Fortnite side, we've kind of reached our ceiling on the mechanical aspect. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I would
I
almost even say
yeah.
that the building side has calmed down and is more just basic like box editing versus where we saw where we saw Fortnite Cash Cups a year and a half ago.
I would tend to agree. I think that like just Fortnite in general is harder because any game that has like a rotating meta where like Rocket League, it's kind of the same game. The only thing really rotating meta wise is like cars or like play style that you can kind of figure out. I feel like just for Fortnite, it's hard to not only learn all the information, learn all the guns, but with the battle royale, just keeping up with every single update, every single kind of change across the map. And I do think building is a really tough skill to learn. That if you're talking about builds in Fortnite, it is one of the hardest things to learn. I think just Rocket League, though, in general, just takes hours. That, like, okay, this is how to do a flip reset. Now I've got to do it 10,000 times to actually master it.
So I think that's one of the things that makes, I think for me, Rocket League such an amazing spectator
Yeah.
sport. right?
Yeah.
I watch an end game on Fortnite, and I know that there ain't no way I'm ever going to be able to do that. You know what I mean? But and maybe I'm just too stubborn to admit that there are some things that the guys at the top, in Rocket League do that I probably couldn't do. But I'm like, you know what? Give me a couple 100 hours, and I bet you
Yeah.
I'm looking something like that. Just because, as from the spectator side, and I think that's part of the reason why it's so easy for it to still continue to attract new viewers is
Yeah.
it's simple, yet like it's engaging in the sense of, oh, like, man, if I and then you try to put in the time, there's always something new to learn. And that's kind of goes back to
Yeah.
like it's an ever expanding esport.
Yeah, it is. It does feel that way, and we're still kind of learning. I think, like you said, that Rocket League is physics based. We're still even finding brand new things that are kind of happening with the game, brand new moves that you can kind of do with the like kind of introduction of the wave dash and kind of all you can do with that.
Look
I
at
think as
all
well.
those clips we've been seeing with the increased like wall dashes into wave
Yeah.
dashing
Yep.
into the this and the that. So I'm not using boost. And like that's
Hmm.
just now kind of reaching its pinnacle.
It is, yeah, and we're probably going to find more things along the way that I feel like could make a difference. I always thought it was funny looking back. I remember this Twitter clip. It was like 5 years ago or something, where it's like two professionals that are trying to both hit a flip reset, and it takes them like 6 minutes to do it. So like that just shows you just how far along we have come. But I also think it's kind of interesting, just like for Fortnite in general. There's always that aspect of like randomness where like Rocket League, yes, you get the random spawns at the start of kickoff. Yes, you get a random spawn if you get demoed, but like you're not going to have to deal with like a max a pool ring in Rocket League. You kind of know what's happening in the game and don't have to deal with all those kind of extra things thrown at you unless there's that change up in the playstyle of the defense.
Yeah, I think it is definitely a different, especially when you talk about for IGLs. Like obviously, I think that's more of a team experience. Obviously, when you talk about the 3v3 in a Rocket League versus a team for Fortnite, because
Yeah.
you have to kind of more rely on that IGL sort of perspective. But um, I just I think the debate is not close. I feel like it really is Fortnite.
Yeah, I think so too. I think we'll call it Fortnite and unfortunately make all the Rocket League players sad. Not that Rocket League players don't work hard, and I think Rocket League is more of just like a kind of tedious game to grind. I'm not gonna lie. Like you said, you know what you gotta do. You just gotta put in the hours to get it done. So I think we will stay on the factor of battle royales, move away from that discussion, and move away to possibly the biggest update in Apex history. Q, we are talking about changes to Evo shields, changes towards the map just a little bit, and the biggest thing, new perk system for every single legend.
Yeah, a lot of changes. It's the reason that we have 3 weeks off of ALGS play after play from last weekend. I don't even think scrims are starting up for pros until I think they're talking about maybe, next week. I think they were talking about on the
Yep.
19th or 20th was when they were talking about starting them up. Um, I think when we talk about for the base game of Apex, the legend change is going to be very, very amazing
Yep.
for the average player. I do think we're going to be rather surprised at ALGS level, even though it's going to open up the meta somewhat,
Yeah.
just because I don't think that there's going to be a very established meta heading in, except for maybe like Bangalore Bloodhound
Yeah. Yeah.
and a flex like option sort of deal.
Hmm.
Um, I don't know how much it changes as far as for ALGS. I'm gonna be curious to see with the armor swaps.
Yeah.
At least it seems from early kind of a little bit that we've seen, you're not gonna be having teams get, heading out of, their POIs with, purples. They're probably gonna be rolling out with blue shields at best, probably quite a few white tees. Yup,
Hmm.
in my white tee. Um, it it's gonna be a really different game. I gotta say, I'm excited to see how the pros play things out to
Yeah.
end split number 1.
I think I am as well. And I think that armor change is actually very significant. Like you mentioned, we're probably going to have teams in end zone with the blue shields because if you're not picking up those new canisters all around the map, I think you have to do something of like 4,000 damage to get your shield up towards the red version. So, I mean, if you're grabbing care packages, if you're doing other things, I think it's very important for zone teams. they're not going to be able, I feel like, to just say, okay, we've looted up our POI, let's take Valk and let's fly straight to God's Spot. No, because you have to get those canisters along the way, or you're going to end up with a white shield versus everybody else, which is something you definitely do not want, especially in Apex Legends. But talking about kind of the perk system and some of these end game changes, we have a lot of big changes. I think the biggest, we got a little bit of a nerf towards Catalyst. That is her name, not Conduit. Catalyst. Her wall got a little bit shortened. The length, the duration got a little bit shortened, but those were kind of added back into the perks. So, it's kind of a nerf, but at the same time, if you upgrade that shield back to purple, it's not really.
I mean, they basically allowed them to have the change, some of the flex changes that we see on a
Yeah.
lot of the other characters, where it's like reverting nerfs that we've seen to them over time.
Yeah.
I gotta say, I feel bad for the casters,
Oh
having
yeah.
to learn all of those emblems this quick. That way you can see it on the HUD and be able to recall it that quick. That's gonna take a little bit of work. I know I'm gonna have to probably work on it as well, in
Yeah.
case I happen to do a little bit of Apex work here soon. But um, I I'm gonna make a hot take,
Okay.
maybe a little too early. I think we see Wraith get back shifted pretty well into meta.
Okay.
Thoughts?
I think Wraith has always been viable, to be fair. Like, it's been more of like a solo play. Like, the ult has been beaten out by other type of mobility ultimates, but I seriously think she is still like relatively like in meta with at any point. If you're running a team that, can use up her abilities correctly, I think as well with her new updates, reducing tactical cooldown by 5 seconds, that's absolutely insane. And tactical windup by 20 seconds if you do get that on the fast phase option number 2, or you can even get an ultimate cooldown by 60 seconds in case you want that port really, really quickly. I mean, it just feels so insane for Wraith to kind of get back in. And it feels like you said, that you can kind of have that flex. You can kind of have anybody that can fill that role. Specifically, though, I want to look at maybe Pathfinder and Vantage. I know we were kind of memeing that before the show. Nobody's gonna really pick these, right? But both of these now have access to separate ring consoles and survey beacons as their first perk. Vantage only has access to the ring consoles, but if Pathfinder chooses one of those, it could really make him just an asset to the team, because you have the Pathfinder zip, you have the mobility from all of Pathfinder's kit, and then all of a sudden you can scan rings as well.
Dog, Pathfinder just be out here ziplining,
He be zipping.
but that's it.
Yeah.
You just wanna be out here zipping everywhere? Where's he gonna be zipping to in
I
Ring
don't know,
3?
man.
16 teams, 18 teams still alive. What's Pathfinder gonna be doing other than zipping back and forth in a building? What are we doing here?
I don't know, man. He could fit. He's flex. Come
Mm,
on. Come on.
I don't know, man. We'll have to wait and see. I do, I feel like obviously information is very, very key at the highest of levels. So being able
It
to
is.
get a plethora of that maybe benefits some teams. I just don't know if I see it. Um,
Okay.
I think maybe, and also, I think it just becomes so hard. Part of it becomes so hard because I do think Bloodhound and Bang are going to be
Yeah.
huge staples, which is
Yeah.
weird because it felt like Bang was starting to kind of fall off or
It did.
a little bit.
Yeah.
Um, I think the catalyst changes are nice enough to make it to where Cat isn't such an auto pick,
Right.
now, which is nice. Um, didn't they also make some changes to Conduit, or am I tripping?
Yes. Her healing time. It's kind of weird. It's a little bit of a buff, a little bit of a nerf. I think in end zones is going to be a little bit worse. I think it's specifically that when she goes to like amp somebody's shields up, it takes longer for the bar to fill up, but it lasts for a longer period of time.
Mm, okay. So you don't get just like that instant boost of shield. It
Right. Right.
takes a
Right.
little bit longer. All right, all right, all right. I mean, I do feel the armor changes is kind of like a nerf to Conduit in a
Yeah.
way, anyways, right? Because you aren't
Yeah.
getting as much potential value on a contest. Because I feel like that was where we were seeing Conduit really used the most.
Yeah.
Um, question: do you
Yes.
think because of the fact that contests aren't so much of a 50-50 gamble because you're not worrying about Am I landing on a purple shield or am I landing on a white
Ooh.
with a pea shooter, right? Um, do you think that we see contest become more prevalent or less prevalent?
I have always been of the mindset that like contests are very very good because every team should have a good team fight. That at the core of Apex, you can talk about team composition, you can talk about rotations all day, but it's
Right.
going to come down to your team fighting skills. And if you can't team fight, if you can't hold your POI, then you don't deserve that POI. And I think that is just the natural selection of the game. That the better teams, if there's a better POI, they should fight for it. They should absolutely, even though it might risk a game, if you can hold that POI and maybe stake it at the beginning of a season to hold it for the rest of the season, it's absolutely massive. And for those teams that may not have the team fighting power as those top teams, it's okay to take a lesser POI. And I think for them, it's okay to maybe back off a little bit, say, okay, we let them have an easier rotation. We'll play a different POI, but we'll at least not be killed off drop. And I think it is really healthy for teams to just say, okay, this is I as much as I love, having, a map to see where every team is dropping, I want to see people change that up. I want to see people just like saying, okay, we're going here and then land somewhere else and then contest somebody else and spice up the game in those early drops.
I see a team like Alliance, who I
Yeah.
feel like is one of the best
Yeah.
3v3 teams
Yeah.
in the world. Now, obviously, things have changed with the whole Yuki retirement and picking up Unlucky. But I think Unlucky in effect with Hawkins is still like a disgusting
Oh
squad,
yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Um, but when I see a team like Alliance, who generally has not been afraid to contest, if I'm Alliance, I think with the armor changes, I'm I think I'm okay with contesting 6 out of 6 drops. Because I
I
know that
yeah.
there's a very good probability that 5 of those I'm getting 3 points off the rip,
Mhm.
and then I add in my continued placement in KP on top of that afterwards, right? Um,
Yeah.
so I am going again, I'm gonna be kind of curious to see when we get to game day. I think it's like March, like, 10th and 11th or
Yep.
something
Yep.
like that. Um, Interested to see if we end up seeing more contests, especially from the better fighting teams who maybe aren't necessarily where we expect them to be on the leaderboard.
I think it's important to fight as well. I mean, we already talked about those Evo changes. If you're not fighting early, or if you're not fighting at all, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So that early fight could get your entire team up to blue. You grab some canisters along the way, all of a sudden you're up to purple by end game, and then if you're farming correctly, you should be able to get towards red. But I think again, only a few teams are going to be able to get towards that red marker. We'll have to see how the contests go. Like you said, it's going to take some time to simmer, time to kind of get a grasp of this meta. I really want to talk about kind of the big new to say perk changes that are happening with some of these legends. Specifically, we got Lifeline with the self res. We have Newcastle with the 250 HP on both his tactical option and his big castle wall segments. We've got Caustic increased by 50% option. We got Gibby Bubbles, small Gibby Bubbles, 25% size, but for 25% of the cooldown. You got as well the new Falling Stars passive for Watson, which I think is one of the most interesting, where if you have a Gibby all to Bangalore to something that you intercept grenade, it'll drop an Arc Star right below the pylon for you to use. How cool is that?
That's pretty dope. I'm not gonna lie. When you started talking about the bubbles, I just thought about your DMs. All that matters is big bubble, give me bubbles, and little bit give me bubbles. But yeah, I think a lot of changes coming down the pipe that again, you look at the 50% decrease on an ult for Caustic, and we know
Oh yeah.
that for Caustic, Caustic is strongest when there's only 1 or 2 Caustics in the lobby.
Hmm.
So if you are the 1 or 2 teams that decide that, we wanna get a little stanky up in here, it
Yeah.
technically makes your composition a little bit stronger. So I do think because there is some of that with a few of the different legends, I think um, I think that's gonna be really exciting to kinda see that again,
Yeah.
that 3rd I think it is going to be a 2 legend meta, and maybe I'm wrong on it being the Bang Blood, but kind
Yeah.
of early indicators, even from what I'm seeing through a couple of streams I've been through. Granted, I'm kind of across a couple of different titles right now, so I haven't spent too much time in Apex, because we're on a couple week break.
Yeah.
But it seems like Bang Blood is kind of like the main fit for the first two. Um, I feel though for really aggressive teams, Horizon's still going to be
Yeah.
a very viable option, especially considering one of your options. Isn't it like a 50% cooldown on the ult
30
for
seconds. I don't
30
know what
seconds?
percentage that is, but yeah,
So I think that's like 30%. But still, that's because isn't it 90 seconds on her ult?
I think. I could be
Yeah,
wrong,
so
but I
it's like a
think.
third, so it's like a 33% shit difference. That's I mean, for a fighting team to
Yeah.
get that much sucking power every basically 60 seconds, that's pretty insane, man.
It is. I do gotta ask kind of about end games for a second because two big changes that I want to kind of focus on. I talked about the caustic ult that you have an option to pick it. It expands the caustic ult by 50% more volume. And the crypto ultimate also has a perk where you can expand it by 25% of the radius. And I was watching a clip and you can see if you know the base of the firing range, it was encompassing from gun side to gun side up like so far that like if you're in an end zone and that crypto ult hits you, that is hitting 18 teams. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, but is it going to get to a spot where it can get off
That's
pause
true.
before it getting shot down, right? Like that's the big issue because usually the pros are pretty good about that.
Yeah.
We'll for sure see crypto because we always have APAC to watch. I don't know if we'll see really too much crypto in EMEA or NA, honestly. Don't be surprised to see a caustic though.
Yeah.
We will for
Yeah.
sure see a caustic probably in North America.
I think so. I think we're also gonna see actually a lot of Maggie. I think with the new
Yeah,
Fireball Ultimate, I think it has a possibility to, continue bouncing, continue doing a lot of damage. I think specifically though, yeah, like you said, Caustic, it's better when there are less of them. I think there's a possibility that we do see a Gibraltar. I was playing. Okay, I'm a little bit biased, but at the same time, I was playing a little bit of him last night, and the smaller bubble again, it's a 10-second uptime. It is a little bit reduced in the size, but it's only a 22-second cooldown, which isn't actually too bad for a 10-second uptime for the bubble. I think it provides a lot of protection. I also think there's going to be Watson teams that are already running Watson that, you get the nades thrown your way and then all of a sudden you're gifted 5 arc stars. You're like, oh, it's my birthday. Now we get to win end zone because we have a billion arc stars. So I think it'll be interesting.
I gotta say the gamer nerd in me is going to very much enjoy
Oh, yeah.
watching the new Apex Legend. As someone who has watched, hero
Yeah.
shooters and MOBAs and stuff like that, where you kind of get to change the game as the game goes along, you know what I mean? Like, it's a new layer that's getting added with Apex, and I think it's going to be fun watching teams over the next couple of months, even though especially the next couple of weeks while they're off. But I don't think teams are really going to have fully figured stuff out until we're right around land time for split
Yeah.
one. Um, which I mean, usually around land time, there's a new meta that gets shaken up anyway, so who
Yeah.
knows? But I think we are going to see that it's going to be a more open meta, even if there is one or two hard pick legends.
Yeah.
And I think it's going to make up some big changes, which I think when you look at Apex Legends is going to do one of two things. It is
Okay.
either going to shift up some storylines, hopefully, especially at the top. Because I don't know about you, man. As much as I love Dark Zero and TSM, I'm tired of seeing them at the top,
Let's go
man. Like,
disguised.
I just want I want a new story, dog. Like, even if it's a new team contesting with one of those teams, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Granted, as someone who's been, and you know this, Llama, I have been the resident NA guy that's been saying that
Yep.
APAC South doesn't get enough respect. I'm finally looking like a G right now with the way that Moist and Dark Zero are looking. But no, I want to see something new. Like I do like seeing an elevate a
Yep.
PLQ team sitting in eighth. You know what I mean? You mentioned Disguise, who was an LCQ team last year, who I think still has some ability to move up the list because they have only played 3 days as opposed to some of the teams with four.
Right.
Um, but I want something new, man. So I would love to
Yeah.
see that all of this freshness give us something new. But here's the bad news, Llama,
What? What's up?
is if TSM and Dark Zero are actually this good, and it comes up to one of these teams is just able to develop metas
Yeah.
like we've seen both of them do, and they're able to figure it out, it's gonna be the same storyline, and come
It
LAN
is.
time, it's gonna be Dark Zero and TSM, and then there's everybody else, and it's just like, I'm so over it, dog, like, I
Yeah.
can't, man.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like it's kind of the same story over and over. I will say the esport is relatively young. Where you look at something like League of Legends, where you can say, okay, the T1 story is getting old. They've won a
Right.
bunch of world championships now, but that esport has also been, 10, 11 years old as well. So I think a change is needed, and I think there is an interesting thing with all these new perks that some of the legends get cooldowns now off of Nox, which
Mm,
importantly, I'm looking at Pathfinder, I'm looking at Revenant. So
this
if
guy
the
in the
team
Pathfinder, dog,
hey,
I
okay, listen, okay, it's just to make a general point, okay? A couple of them have that tactical reset off of Nox, and for Revenant, I'll tell it off of Revenant, who we've seen a little bit maybe more in that professional level. It could be absolutely huge if the team fight is once again your focus. If you once
right.
again are not playing as three players, all of a sudden you give over one pick, the Revenant's flying away, and then he's flying back in your face, fully reset. The team is there to back him up. So I think team fighting is going to be just that much more important. And with that shakeup, I could see teams running in ranked some of those legends with knock cooldowns that, you're taking a 3v3 somewhere out in the field, then you get a knock all of a sudden to change the entire team fight.
I hope we get some changes, man. I really do because I
Yeah.
think when we look at the good news, when you do, I do gotta say this: when you look at the top of a battle royale and you see two teams that have that continued success that they have, I think it shows that regardless of the fact that there's RNG involved, that consistency obviously means something. Because you have the Dark Zeros and the TSMs, and even to the extent right now under the name of LG, but you have the Sweets
Yeah,
in the world who are also consistently up there. You can even say the same thing about Moist last year. Moist was one of the best consistently
that's true.
performing teams. Their lowest performance was like what, a 10th, 11th, I think, something like that. I
Hmm.
think it was a 10th. I think it was like 6, 6, 10, or 6, 7th, 10th, or something like that. Um, so when you have teams that are able to show that much consistency, it does mean that it's not just luck to win an event. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it definitely takes lots and lots of practice. I want to do one final thing. I think before we close it out here today, you kind of said Bangalore Bloodhound is how you're looking for your team composition. I want to throw out my personal team composition, which I think works even better. It's the comp I played when
Pathfinder.
I played professional. No, not Pathfinder. Givey, Ash, and Fuse. I think Fuse is still very, very underrated. Fuse has, by the way, never received a nerf. He has only ever received buffs, buff after buff after buff. I tell you, my roommate, bro, he started playing Fuse as soon as he came out. He's just like, oh, I'm living the dream. Buff after buff after buff after buff. I still think it's a strong composition. I think Ash got a big buff with her arc snare. I want to hear Q what your dream composition is.
Oh, my dream composition,
Yeah.
huh? So I have always wanted to see the Watson Newcastle combo like
Yeah.
truly get its shine. Like back when before Moist got picked up and it was still Burger at the time and then got picked up by Moist, like they at the start of last year looked really good running that composition. Yeah, I mean, I think it would probably be the Watson Newcastle, and then you gotta throw Bang in there because you need it
Okay.
in today's game.
Okay. I like to see it. I'm definitely down for it. I think the bang is going to be interesting. I think Watson is just going to be gifting arc stars over to the teammate, and I think it's going to be a fun season nonetheless. I gotta say, lots of stuff happening with RLCS and ALGSQ. I'm excited to see in these upcoming weeks what happens.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on there, and we're gonna have a whole bunch of stuff to start talking about with Valorant coming up here as
True.
well. We got the VCT kickoff starting this weekend, so we'll actually finally have stuff to start talking about next week as well. But man, this was I know we've had some troubles being able to get together for the first
Yeah.
one, especially with Nick being late today. My goodness gracious! No, I want to give a big shout out to our producer that's put in the work in the back. Not he wasn't actually him late today. I'm not going to say who it was, but it definitely wasn't me. Uh,
Definitely wasn't me. No. What are you talking about?
um, but we are definitely going to need to be doing this more often, Llama. We'll have to find a time to do this more consistently. The meltdown was an absolute blast. I think that wraps things up for me. But if there's anything else you want to say, go ahead and throw it on in there and get us up on up out of here, my friend.
Shout out to the people. Make sure to sign up for our Frost Rocket League event over on Monday. We got some big events planned. We got lots of $100 Rocket League events here coming in the future, so make sure to get your Rocket League team signed up. That's going to be all for Q and Llama. Thank you all so much for tuning into the Meltdown, and remember, stay frosty.